Hi guys, I'm back with another video. Today I wanted to talk about my autism evaluation. I was diagnosed with autism in April of 2014. I was 21. I'm 28 going on 29 now. I'll be 29 at the end of this month. So I have here with me my diagnostic report. It's 18 pages long, so we won't go through the whole thing. I really just wanted to show you the highlights so you could get an idea of what a diagnostic report might look like, the kinds of tests that I took for it, and things like that. Now, keep in mind that there are a number of different ways that an autism evaluation can be conducted, so if you're getting one, it may not look exactly like mine, but here's that. It's backwards now. I can't tell if it'll be backwards when the video plays, but so like I said, I was 21 when I got this. I got it through my school. My university had a psychological services center with a sliding scale fee based on your income for payment, and I was unemployed at the time, so I paid $500 out of pocket for my assessment. But yeah, so let's go to the tests and we can talk about those. Tests administered included cognitive and achievement tests. So I had an IQ test, which was the WAIS 4, and an academic achievement test, which was the WIAT 3, psychological functioning assessments, so tests of like anxiety, depression, other mental health conditions, things like that. There was a personality assessment to rule out personality disorders, and then there was the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, otherwise known as the ADOS, which those of you who have watched other diagnostic videos before may be familiar with. Now, going forward, there might be some spoilers, I guess, for these tests. I'm going to be talking about what I did during them and things like that. So if you're preparing for your own assessment and you don't want to be biased and sort of know the answers ahead of time to some of these tests, then maybe skip ahead a little bit. But the ways for the IQ test was broken down into several categories. We had full-scale IQ, verbal IQ, perceptual reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. Now, so the full-scale IQ is just a combination of all of the subscores, and subscores look at different types of brain functions. So verbal IQ looks at how well you use and understand language, your reading and writing abilities, stuff like that. And then perceptual reasoning is your nonverbal skills, so things like pattern recognition, spatial awareness, I don't really remember what else, but like parts of your brain that don't involve speech and verbal comprehension and things like that fall under perceptual reasoning. working memory is just your short-term memory, how long you can hold things in your memory before you either forget them or you repeat them enough that they get transferred to long-term memory. And processing speed is how quickly you're able to understand and respond to cues in the environment. So understanding verbal directions, written directions, how fast you're able to execute tasks, and things like that. And this is only tangentially related to autism. It is very common for autistic individuals to have wide gaps between their subscores. So, for example, verbal people such as myself tend to have much higher verbal IQs than perceptual reasoning or nonverbal IQs. There will be a big gap, and a gap of more than 10 points tends to be an indicator of some sort of learning difference or autism, ADHD, things like that. The gap for my scores was... I'm really not very good at math. Well, let's just say my verbal IQ is 141 in the very superior range in the 99th percentile, and my nonverbal skills, nonverbal IQ is, the score is 94, which is average in the 34th percentile. So that's a gap of more than 40 points, almost 50 points, I think, 47 points, something like that. So that gap is very unusual for people in the neurotypical population, but quite common for autistic individuals. So that's what the IQ test kind of looked like. And they asked me a bunch of questions. It was 7 years ago, so I don't really remember the specifics, but there were like reading questions, writing questions, questions of testing my short-term memory, and then for nonverbal skills there was like a block design. I was given a bunch of little cubes with red and white patterns on them, and then I was given a picture and I had to replicate the picture with the blocks. And then there was like, for processing speed, there was tests of like rows of patterns, and I had to like cross out that there were multiples of certain images or whatever. And then there were also, for processing speed, tests where I was given a number, and then at the top of the page, each number was correlated with a random symbol, and I had to write in the symbol for each number, and do as many of those as I could in a certain time period. So that's kind of what that looked like. Very brief overview. It took an hour, maybe an hour and a half, to complete the whole IQ test. I did my whole test, my whole autism assessment over many days. So I'd go in for one day, take a test, wait a couple of weeks, go in, take a different test, and then continue like that. My ADHD test did not do that. I did that much more recently this year, with a different organization, and they did all the tests in one go. It took like 4 hours to complete everything, but for my autism assessment. They did them one at a time. I won't really go much into the WIAT, the academic achievement test, because that doesn't have so much to do with autism. I was being assessed for dyscalculia, which is a math learning disability, at the same time, so they just threw that test in there. I don't have dyscalculia, I'm just really bad at math, so there's that. And then it talks about what each of my scores means, which I kind of already went over. And then it has numbers associated with each of the subcategories of the, sorry, my cat just jumped on the bed, of the subscores. But I really want to get to the ADOS. We did depression and anxiety inventories. I also have generalized anxiety disorder and persistent depressive disorder with major depressive episodes is what it's called. And then there was the personality assessment. So I don't have any personality disorders like borderline personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder or paranoid personality disorder or any of those. None of that was an issue. They mostly did that test just to rule those out, to make sure that none of those was presenting symptoms that might have looked like autism, but in fact weren't. So my ADOS, they had, this is all of the, they call them presses, so the types of things that the assessor did to try and prompt a specific response, either autistic or not. And then on this side we have my scores. 1s are mildly autistic and 2s are significantly autistic. So my total score for the ADOS was a 13, with 10 being the cutoff for autism. So it had things like stereotyped and idiosyncratic use of words or phrases. I had, they called them odd words and phrases. So I used because my vocabulary is so high, I know a lot of words, and I tend to communicate in a more rigid or formal manner, especially when I'm nervous. My speech patterns become very rigid and sort of, I guess, I don't know how to explain it, but I use a lot of very formal language, and I did that a lot during this assessment because I was super nervous for it. And so they took note of that. They had descriptive, conventional, instrumental, or informational gestures. So the use of gestures to emphasize your speech or describe what you're explaining. I really don't use gestures a lot. Apparently my body language tends to be quite flat. So I was marked for that one as well. And there's unusual eye contact. I'm really bad at eye contact. I tend to look off and to the side when I'm talking to an actual person and not a camera. And so I got a 2 for that one. Facial expressions, you can probably tell that my face tends to be a little flat. I don't emote a lot with my face. So there's that one. Empathy and comments on others' emotions. I'm bad at picking up when other people are feeling things, but I'm good at responding emotionally when other people tell me they're feeling things. So people call that low empathy, because if you don't tell me what you're feeling, I can come across as unempathetic or like I don't care. I do care, I just didn't notice that you were feeling things. So there's that. But if you tell me you're feeling things, then I'm good at responding to that. But I got a 1 for that as well. Then they had quality of social overtures, so efforts to connect socially with other people, to start a conversation, to keep a conversation going, to show interest in another person. I didn't do very well at that either. So I got a 1 for that. And then they had amount of reciprocal social communication, which is responding to other people when they make social overtures. So keeping a conversation that they started going, or expressing interest in what they're saying, all of that stuff. I was really bad at that. I got a 2 for that. And then they've got restricted and repetitive behaviors. I have a lot of stims, so things, it's short for self-stimulatory behaviors, and it means body movements or vocalizations that are repetitive in nature, that fulfill a sensory need. In a couple of days when I do the unboxing of the new sensory fidgets that I'm getting, I'll explain a little bit more about stimming and sensory needs and fidgeting and all of that. But I personally do a lot of flapping and rocking and chewing. That's what this is. It's a chewy tube for stimulation to my jaw. But it calms or ramps up the nervous system depending on the type of stimming you're doing and its purpose. So for example, for me, I flap when I'm really agitated or frustrated or anxious or overwhelmed, and it's a way for me to get that excess negative energy out, sort of like flicking water off your hands kind of thing, to like regulate and calm down and all of that stuff. But like I said, we'll talk more about that in the fidgets video. So they had that on there. Excessive interest in unusual or highly specific topics or objects, so that's like special interests, which will be the topic of a different video. Autistic people basically develop very narrow, rigid interests in things. The reason my channel is called Autisaurus is because my 2 big obsessions right now are autism and dinosaurs. Totally obsessed with dinosaurs, research them all the time, fascinated with every piece of information I can get on them. I collect them, all of that stuff, and so that's what that one means. I got a 1 for that one. So yeah, that's basically a description of what they look at in the ADOS. And so some of the tests that they did to look for these types of behaviors I don't remember all of them because, like I said, it was 7 years ago. But one that I remember is having to describe a picture book that had no words in it. It was just pictures, and I had to describe the pictures in the book. So apparently they wrote that I was able to fill in details of stories based on presented pictures, but was very literal in telling the story, that is, related exactly what was depicted in the picture without much elaboration. So I basically didn't tell a story, I just described the images I was seeing, which I guess wasn't what they were looking for. So there's that. Another one was they had a bag full of random objects, and I had to pick 3 of them and tell a story with those objects. And it said that I had some creativity, though it was limited in range and primarily within one structured situation. So it was kind of rigid and not very natural, I guess. The examiner also just had conversations about my interests and certain aspects of social life. Like they asked questions like, what is a friendship? How are you a friend to others? Why do people get married? Why do people, what do certain emotions mean? Things like that. And that was to both gauge my understanding of social ideas and also to get a sense of my conversational style. It said throughout the testing session, I had reduced frequency of reciprocal social communication and appeared to depend primarily on the examiner to carry the conversation. So I can answer questions, and if you ask me a question, I can answer it, and then I'll usually ask you the same question right back. But I'm really bad at elaborating on questions or coming up with new questions to ask. Like, having a conversation, an unstructured conversation with me is a massive struggle for both parties. So my overall combined communication and social interaction score met cutoff criteria for autism spectrum disorder. And so I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder level 2. The level 2 means basically moderate. There are 3 levels, levels 1, 2, and 3, with 1 being the mildest form of autism, what used to be called Asperger's syndrome, and 3 being the highest support needs, with, so like nonverbal, intellectual disabilities, significant social challenges, inability to live independently, stuff like that. So I am a level 2. I'm in the moderate range. And if anybody's interested, this video is quite long already, so I'll probably wrap it up here. But at any point, if anyone wants to, I can do a more detailed video about my autism and my symptoms specifically. But that was an overview of my autism assessment. I can do another video about my ADHD assessment, which, like I said, was much more recent. It was just this year, back in September. So I'll probably do another video for that in the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, thanks for watching my first real video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and please feel free to leave your thoughts about it in the comments, as well as ideas for other videos going forward. I would be very happy to look at those and do some videos based on your ideas. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you in the next one.